the book, the man, and what is it? The book, the man, and the place.
Yeah.
Those three things. The book and the place, I think, have been the easiest ones to knock down. But over the past couple of years, the man himself has entered into more of a focus, especially with what we've discovered about the fact that there's an inscription 523 that supposedly is Muhammad in an inscription to do with the Lord of the Jews. So it's I know you said it's Jews and Christians, but at least it's written in a form that would suggest it strongly Jewish origin of connection. Yeah, so that's where we're at. I think for me the exciting part is looking at the man and debunking the man. But I think there will be some people who watch this and they will think, I don't think there was a real person in the 7th century because I'm debunking the standard Islamic narrative. But notice what I'm doing is I'm questioning the Muslim version of what happened, but I'm not dismissing the idea of a historical person. And I think one of the things I've had to deal with, in the last year is the fact I'm dealing with a straw man argument leveled against me, which is that I don't think there was any person that existed. I've gone through different possibilities in my mind, trying to work it out, but I don't hold to any fixed idea. I'm open to there being a historical person, but given the long period of time from when he was supposed to have lived and when his story was written down, I think you don't have to be massively skeptical to realize that there's a good chance that a lot of the material is wrong because the people writing it down simply never met the person. So it could be that what you're reading is just propaganda created by caliphs 2 centuries later for particular purposes.
100%. You won't say, but I would say the 7th century Muhammad never existed. That is a fable. That is a legend. I'm going to say it's a legend. I like the word legend. You know why I like the word legend? Because it literally means unverified information. You cannot verify that Muhammad existed in the 7th century. No scholar has done it yet. And if somebody wants to say, yes, we've done it, please provide a scholar that tells us it happened. None of them do. I would say, if you go back to the textbooks inside of Islamic studies, they usually say 570 to 632 is the tentative dates of Muhammad. Meaning, it hasn't been tentative, literally means it hasn't been verified. This is just what the traditions say, and we're moving forward with it.
Yeah.
You with me?
I would define it even further, if I may, is what you're saying is the Muhammad of the standard Islamic narrative never existed.
Yes.
You're not disputing the fact that there could be one or a dozen different prophets that were putting themselves forward.
100%.
Yeah.
I definitely do think that, for those people who follow me, know my channel, I put forward, yes, there was a Muhammad. That Muhammad existed in the 6th century, and he was an Abyssinian apostle that later, other people took that story, replicated that story, fabricated, embellished the story, and with their own biases and want to push forward their own political agenda or their own tribal or racial agenda, they've constructed this Muhammad that is now solidified after like 10th century onwards. Yeah, we know that Muhammad. That Muhammad that is solidified 10th century onwards through the Hadith collections, etc., that never existed in the 7th century. It all came from 6th century Christian. Again, let me say again, the Christian apostle Muhammad. And again, please, I want my followers to go ahead and go find out about this individual. This person is literally written about within inside of their Syria literature and other literatures as well. It's literally there to say that this person came with the king Abraham and spread a new form of Christianity throughout the Arabian Peninsula, united all of these Arabs together underneath this religion. And you can find it inside of Greek records as well. Like this individual was a real person that actually existed. But for some reason, another Muhammad comes in the 7th century and does exactly the same thing that the 6th century Muhammad did, and we all believe in the 7th century Muhammad instead of the 6th century Christian Muhammad.
Can I question just one thing?
Yeah.
Do you have evidence of a name of Muhammad connected to this individual?
What do you mean?
In the sources that you've looked at for this individual, do they actually refer to him as Muhammad?
So only in the Islamic or the Arabic ones, they refer to him as Muhammad, or inside of the Greek literature, they refer to him as Amir.
Oh, okay.
And inside of the Islamic literature, they refer to him as Amir and Muhammad.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting when you go back and you check. Literally, it's the first time I think inside of Greek external sources that Hijazi area is being mentioned. So the Ma'ad area is being mentioned. And it literally links back to this individual who was the actual ruler of that section of Arabia in the mid-6th century to late 6th century.
I think just looking forward in time to whenever Mecca was founded as a place, it could be that link might have been the reason why they chose that particular location, because the reason behind why Mecca was picked as a location is not clear. But that might offer some semblance of a reason.
Yeah, I think, as far as I know, with inside of like Islamic studies, you have two cities, Mecca, Medina. You've just got two different groups of people that became prominent somehow and created their own myth, their own founding narrative. The Medinians had their own founding narrative. The Meccans had their own founding narrative. They were in competition with one another. So they decided, or later scholars decided, to give them the same amount of veracity, the same amount of prominence. So if you know anything about the chronology within inside of the Muhammad chronology, it's all based upon symbolic numbers. So for example, Muhammad spent 10 years in Mecca. To give the same prominence to Medina, he spent another 10 years in Medina.
Yeah.
Muhammad was given a symbolic age of 40 prior to receiving revelation. So he was 40, and then after the age of 40, which is a symbolic number to mean maturity, to reach the four corners of the earth, etc., the four winds, etc., etc., etc. 4 is like a very prominent number. 40 days, 40 nights. It's a very symbolic number. They said, okay, 40 plus 10 plus 10 is 60. And then if you know anything else, 3 is another number. So some places you'll find it that he was in occultation for 3 years, being secretly taught by some angels, and then afterwards, that's when he, came out in public in Mecca and so forth for 10 years and 10 years in Medina. So sometimes you see he was either 60 or 63 years of age when he died. It's all symbolic. None of it is actually. Yeah. So we've touched on the standard Islamic narrative. I want to do this, right? So I think I've just done a quick myth buster. So I want to know, what is your major myth buster within inside of Islam? Like, what is it in Islamic studies that scholars rarely talk about, but it's like a massive thing? And I think we've just made mention of Mecca, but go ahead, tell me, what is it?
Yeah, it has to be Mecca.
Yeah.
It's hard to believe it actually, but as far as I know, it was myself that popularized the focus on the hydrological problem with Mecca. I remember doing a video with Jay a few years ago now, and I looked at the issue of the Zamzam well, and what I discovered that even if you are pulling out buckets of water flat out all day long, you're not going to get enough water out of the well, presuming there's enough water in there to begin with to support a big population, So that was the first issue that arose, and if you look at the standard Islamic narrative, I think the figure is something like Muhammad had 100,000 companions wherever they lived. I don't know. So that's an issue. And then there is a story that in the latter end of the 8th century, I think it was 790 to 801 roughly, Zubaydah built story itself is even true. I'll explain why in a second, but let's assume it's true. What that tells us is that there wasn't enough water there to begin with to support the population, and it was especially true if there were pilgrims going to Mecca. You need water. There wasn't enough water. But if we skip forward to the 16th century, we find a very similar story to the Zubaydah story, which was that a daughter or wife of the caliph at the time, Suleiman, I believe it was involved in updating the water system around Mecca, and I was thinking, that sounds too similar to the earlier story, and it makes me think that that was the first initial work that was done with the water system, and like they do everywhere with these stories, the retroactively push the thing back to earlier times. And they like to do that a lot. If you look at it at the Sand Islamic, we see that happening all over the place. So, well, I don't have solid proof that that's what they did. It's too spookily similar, and I'm suspicious. In either case, even if it was true that the aqueduct was built when they say it was built, I think that disproves the idea that there was a big population in Mecca in the time of Muhammad. And if there wasn't enough water, it means you don't have enough people to have a culture. And if you don't have a culture, you don't have the wherewithal for a person to be aware of the Torah and the Talmud and the Christian sources and the Book of Jubilees and countless other sources that you find in the Quran. That's not humanly possible. Muhammad didn't have the internet in the 7th century. If there was a tiny population there, he would have been, yes, a very ignorant man who couldn't make all these literary connections in a book. There's just no way. So that, I would say that's the myth busted there.
100%. Amazing. Family, you guys are actually tuned in live with us right now. Shouts out to JC, Quranic Endgame as well. Please, salute to you. I can't wait. If you ever come over to the UK, this is going to be your second home, just to let you know. I absolutely got love for you. Family, if you're tuning right now, if you have any questions for the good brother Mel, please send them in right now. I will be taking at least one or two questions. But apart from that, we spoke earlier on a particular video. Let's see if we can get it up by Solomon Dost. Let me get this video up. I'm gonna play it, and then I just want to hear your thoughts on this. And I think we will definitely, if you can't hear it, we will definitely be posting Solomon Dost right now. Let's just play it.
Let's say that we're gonna give Muhammad the chance to have only 3 books, as if he's in an island. To come up with a book like the Quran, which 3 books would be enough? I always ask myself, I teach a course on the Bible and the Quran. And what I see is that if Muhammad had access to the Book of Jubilees and the Book of Enoch, one for apocalyptic traditions, heaven and hell, etc., creation, fallen angels, one for the biblical stories, you would cover something like 90% of the biblical stories in the Quran, and 90% of the Quran's cosmography, etc. The Book of Jubilees being a digested form of Genesis plus most of Exodus, for example, would be enough, right? And it has all the bells and whistles of the biblical canon at the time, at least according to guest speaking people. Same goes for the Book of Enoch. So that's why indicating some affinities with the Ethiopian context could then lead us to start asking this question: what did Muhammad really need to know all of these?
So I definitely wanted to play this on here, especially with you, because thankfully you was the first channel that I reached out to, the first channel that showed me love to actually put forward my Abyssinian origin thesis. I think there was 2 theses: the Muhammad thesis and the Negus thesis, or the Ethiopian king thesis. And right now, scholars are finally coming out in the forefront to say, yes, there definitely is an Abyssinian Ethiopian connection with the origins of Islam. He said quite explicitly, you would only need 2 books to explain 90% of the stories inside of the Quran, the cosmography, etc., inside of the Quran. Those are the 2 Ethiopian books: the Book of Jubilees and the Book of Enoch. In another video, he goes on to say, and to fill in the rest, all he would need is a speaking friend, and a lot of the problems would be solved.
If you would ask me that question, how many books would he need to have to write a book like the Quran, if that's your perspective? Jubilees and Enoch would be enough. You don't even need a 3rd. Some stories that he heard would be enough to fill those. And then you can maybe leap to another place and say, and sometimes people consider this, people like Noldeke, I think Alois Panga considered this. Well, if he hadn't if you had a guest speaking friend, that would solve a lot of problems. A lot of problems, I would say.
Most people don't know that the only language outside of Arabic that Muhammad actually spoke, according to the traditions, is guess what? Guess! Ethiopic, okay? So, I just want to hear your thoughts on that. And then we move on.
I think that's a solid piece of evidence. Now, you know me, I tend to go for a northern narrative. And I've been kind of interested in the idea of an Ethiopic link. But it's there in even in the standard Islamic narrative, there's hints of some Ethiopic connection. I think the fact that you can see elements of the Jubilees, etc., in the Quran would have forced early Muslims to have to admit some Ethiopic connection, even if they didn't want to admit it. I think it'd be worth doing a deep dive into the sources and connecting them up. I'd love to actually grab a hold of the Jubilees now and have a look at it. But I think the themes that you find in the Quran, they're very dark, they're very apocalyptic, and that's very much like what you find in Jubilees and Enoch. I think, when did I read in Enoch? I think it was like 2018 I read Enoch. And I actually was depressed after reading it because it was so dark.
Yes.
It makes you feel like no one is saved, like it's like you got a 1 in a billion chance of getting to heaven, and it's like really depressing. It's like, whoa, you know? At least that's how I remember. That's what I came away with. It's like, took a while to kind of clear that out of my mind. But actually, that fits very nicely with what the Quran is saying. And actually, funny enough, when I first read the Quran through, I had a similar feeling. It's very depressing. It's like you're being hammered over the head on every page, you know. So yeah, I think that's a great piece of evidence. So it's another piece of the jigsaw, you know. Yeah.
Just check. And we'll see if there is any questions. Let me just see. Much respect for Mel, says mystical Lord of Israel. What's your thoughts on Fatima and Aisha being wives of Ishmael in the Targum? So let me recite that again. What are your thoughts on Fatima and Aisha being the wives of Ishmael in the Targum?
Yeah, that's something I covered a couple of years ago, and unfortunately, I can't remember the name of the Jewish author that wrote about this. And I do believe, I think Judith might be her first name. I can't remember her name, but anyway, maybe I can look it up and put it underneath afterwards. But she makes a very strong case for the reference to Ishmael having Fatima Aisha. Now, I think in the original version, I think it was spelled slightly different. It was like, I think it might be Idesha or something like that. Very close. But actually, you find in a later Jewish source, the name escapes me at the minute, but it was written in around the 8th century. You now have Aisha spelled the way it is in the Islamic narrative. I lean very strongly towards that this individual's name was borrowed from that source, and I think that's where they took the character name and they built a huge amount of stories around it. If you think about hadiths, it's probably a third of all the hadiths feature Aisha. And if that is a character that's literally made up and borrowed from a Jewish source originally, and it was, just think about it, it's Ishmael's wife. They're trying to make their prophet like on the same level as Ishmael. And how do you do it? Well, you populate his family, whether it be daughters, wives, with the names connected with Ishmael. That's what you do. And it's like a massive smoking gun. But an awful lot of scholars will not accept that book was written in the 4th century at a time when